to the Jubilee Museum Series. I'm your host, Wanda Dengel, and joining me from Columbus, Ohio, in our studio is Shawn Kenney, the Executive Director of the Jubilee Museum. Shawn, I understand you have something that's very special that you brought from the museum today. It's over 100 years old, and it fits perfectly with what we're going to be discussing this afternoon about Lent. Could you tell us a little bit about what you've got here?
So this is a vestment, so a priestly robe that is used primarily for the Requiem Mass. We see the black vestment like this, but this one's a little more special. It goes above and beyond just your typical skull and crossbones that a lot of times you would see on an old Requiem vestment. This has our Lord's crucifixion with Mary and John at the bottom of the cross, and in a little bit we'll pull it up so everybody can see it. But beautiful vestment, somewhere probably 1890s. The black velvet, brass thread, and this was actually hand stitched. We can tell by the way the threads are actually elongated here. There's not a tight stitching. The machines at the time could not get anywhere near. Today we can do that with machines, but at the time it was not even something that even possible or thinkable. So hand stitched, and most likely not by sisters at the time, but some of our vestments going back before this, there were orders of nuns. That's what they did. They stitched vestments. And very, very beautiful, workmanship. And the time that went into these vestments was crazy. Some of the stories for some of the different orders over the years of sisters that were stitching vestments, some of the stories were it took them to make a set of vestments. It could take up to 5 years to stitch one set, depending on how detailed. And these were vestments that were used by the popes or by bishops in big towns. So the amount of craftsmanship and detail work that went into them was beautiful.
It's amazing. It's amazing to see these tiny stitches that come together to create a variety of colors, and not just a variety of colors, but to see one color in a gradient pattern. It is truly amazing.
When you really don't hear anymore about metal thread, we don't use that very much anymore. And of course, we're at a time period now where, even with cars and things, we're using plastic for almost everything. I own an antique Model T Ford, and one thing I like about that car is it's all metal. And that's why the car still works. It's still functioning. So today you buy a pair of jeans or a T-shirt, and it just disintegrates within time. This is when we were using really good materials. So the brass thread on this, the real black velvet, the proper silk underlining. These things were made to last a long time. So it really makes it beautiful. We can hold it up here if we pull it out a little bit. Give you a chance to really see this
look
vestment.
at that.
Of course, you see Mary and John at the foot of the cross. So it's very interesting. A lot of people don't recognize that the only apostle to be at the crucifixion was John. So that's why we always see him depicted at the bottom of the cross there with his mother.
The threads are just so amazing. It is like a painting. Can we turn it around
we
so we
can
see the other side?
And what's interesting about this vestment is this is actually on permanent loan to the museum from a priest. He found this on eBay. So now the rest of the set is missing. There would have been a deacon and a subdeacon vestment, as well as the manna pools and things that we spoke about in previous shows. But this is the main vestment, and very, very beautiful. Again, you can really see the brass work in this. So. Very,
and
very
you can see the interior, the silk lining that's in purple. And is there a reason why purple was used?
Purple was used a lot, especially for Requiem vestments. But normally whatever the color of the vestment was, so if it was green for ordinary time, that's what the backing was too. Sometimes a different variation of the color that was on the front.
So this would have been used during Lent as well as funerals?
It could have been used any time. So the Requiem vestment could be used during Lent, during Advent, during ordinary time. So the Requiem Mass was kind of set out of the normal church. Now, one thing about the Requiem funeral, though, and since we're in Lent, we just got into it here. One thing to point out is if a Requiem Mass is done during Lent, you still have to follow the rules of Lent. So we're not allowed to use the word Alleluia. So that is still ex-nade from the Requiem Mass. So we got to still hold to those things for the Requiem Mass, but still very, like I said, very beautiful. This is at a time where craftsmanship was very important.
And it's written in Latin.
And I know you're a Latin scholar, Wanda, so. Very beautiful.
It is. It is gorgeous, and you can see this up close at the museum.
Yep. It's on display in our Holy Land collection, where we have our different vestments.
Well, we have, we're talking about Lent. Lent is a period that lasts 40 days, correct?
Correct.
And the first day of Lent is
Ash Wednesday.
Ash Wednesday, okay. So Lent is a time, as we see on our screen, a time of prayer and fasting and charity, and Ash Wednesday in particular begins the Lenten season.
Right, and I think it's interesting too to point out that every year Easter changes. So our Ash Wednesday, it's late this year. Obviously we had it yesterday, March 6th, but it's interesting because that fluctuates. Sometimes it could be early in February. We've literally had times where we just took the Christmas stuff down. The official end of Christmas, as you saw in our last episode, is Candlemas, I mentioned, February 2nd. Well, I think we actually had Ash Wednesday was a week after that, a couple years ago. It was the earliest it could possibly be. So this year is kind of late, but now if you notice Christmas, that doesn't move. That's because we set the date for Christmas. We don't really know when Christ was born, the date. We know obviously the year, but we do not know the date. So it was just a date that was set. It stays that way every year. But Easter we know the exact day, so that's why it fluctuates, because the calendar was different back then. And then again 40 days starting from Ash Wednesday up through Holy Week. So it's as you said, a time of reflection and prayer, and to really meditate on what Christ came here for. He came here to teach and to preach, but he came here to die for our sins, was the ultimate sacrifice. So this is that time to really, pray and fast, which as Catholics, we do a lot of fasting, not just during Lent, but giving up meat on Fridays. That's something that a lot of people kind of given up or forgot about. But we still give up meat on Friday and Ash Wednesday. So I tell you what, and you never really realize how much you miss meat until that first Friday in Lent.
Until Ash Wednesday.
Ash Wednesday.
Well, we receive ashes on Ash Wednesday, and as we said, we also fast and abstain. The way that I remember the difference between fasting and abstaining is that fasting, I think of the word limit. When you fast, you limit the food and drink. When you abstain, you do not. You do without a food or drink. So when we abstain, we don't eat meat on Friday or on Ash Wednesday. But when we fast, our evening meal is no greater than the combination of the two other meals we've had during the day. So we limit. So fasting limit, and abstaining you do without. So those are the ways that I remember.
Absolutely. And again, Jesus, first of all, we have Lent, 40 days. Well, this is, in remembrance and symbolism of Christ spending 40 days in the desert where he fasted and he prayed. So this is where this comes from. We don't just make this up. So, and obviously when Christ was in the desert, when you, as a human, when you are neglected something, you're neglected food, you're neglected something that you're used to having, you want it more. So, but this shows human willpower. So Christ was showing us, when Christ was in the desert, the devil came to him. I can give you palaces, I can give you this, I can give you this. And was tempted, till finally he said, be gone. I answer to the Lord our God, and that is it, and to my Father. And so this is, a chance for us to, to show how strong we are in our faith. If we can sit here and abstain through 40 days, we can give up meat on Fridays. It's hard. It is hard, but and we're human. We give in a human weakness constantly. But Christ was a human, God in the flesh. He had the same temptations that we have, but he was also successful those 40 days and 40 nights as well. So again, during Lent, praying, fasting, and again, this is coming from Jesus, where we are literally going through his 40 days that he spent in the desert, leading, and then obviously into the glorious Easter. So,
well, we take our own suffering and combine it, or try to combine it with Christ. There is a recent. A recent movement in Croatia that I have to tell you about that has to do with Ash Wednesday, and that is that besides receiving the ashes and fasting and abstaining, that they have taken away smoking for one day. I even saw a sign where the cigarette was broken in half, because that is not easy to do. It is not easy to even to give it up for that one day. But I thought that was interesting that in recent times that the Croatians as a group have decided that they were going, if they smoked, that they were going to give up smoking as the beginning of Lent, to show that they spiritually want to unite themselves with Christ.
And as Catholics, we're abstaining from meat on Fridays, but we also are asked to give up something else. So a couple years ago, I gave up pop. I gave up soda. And I tell you, I was drinking, in college, 8 or 9 Mountain Dews a day. And when I gave it up for those 40 days, now I drink maybe 1 or 2 cans of pop a week, Sprite. So I'm thankful for that. It actually got me off of it. So to give up something like that, and then you really want it bad. But again, you can do some good for yourself personally, not just spiritually, but for your physical body as well. So.
And even children do that. And for children, if they particularly like video games, they may give up the video games and maybe just on Sunday play a game. Cut down the amount of time or the number of days. And so giving things up, doing works of mercy, charitable works, reading the Bible more, all of those things are part of Lent. But I wonder if our viewers know, where do these ashes come from?
Most people have no idea.
Would you like to tell us?
Absolutely. So Ash Wednesday, and Ash Wednesday is something that most Christian denominations participate in, not just Catholics. We a lot of times don't see that too often. Everybody has their own symbolism, but you'll even see Lutherans, Methodists, and even other churches wearing the ashes. It's just something you go to a service and receive. But Ash Wednesday is, again, marks the beginning, but also is a reminder to us that we are dust, and to dust we shall return. We're human. We are human, and we were created by God, but our earthly body will literally be dust again one day. So don't wait to know Jesus. And so this is our reminder this day at that service.
Could you show us the next image, please? This is how we get ashes. We take the palms from the previous, the priest may have had palms left over from the previous Palm Sunday, and invites parishioners to bring their old palm branches, and then this is a fire pit, but I've seen it where they have used a charcoal barbecue pit because it has an opening on the bottom. So I remember a priest gathering all the old palm branches, putting them in the barbecue pit that had been cleaned out, and then that little opening at the bottom, there's a pan that catches all the ashes. The ashes are ready to go. And what's interesting is that they add a little bit of oil. Is it chrism oil?
Yep.
And that helps the ashes stick to the forehead. It kind of combines the ashes.
And I think it's interesting you're bringing up palm branches because this is another thing that a lot of other churches have as well. So when Jesus came in to the village, everybody had the palm branches. He was riding in on the donkey. So they're waving the palm branches. That's a very biblical thing. But we are using these old palm branches, and most people just throw them away when they're done. But in the Catholic Church, we go and take these beautiful palm branches, which were blessed at the Palm Sunday service. We take them home, and if you have a crucifix at your home or a religious image on the wall, you're putting your palm branch behind that image. It's a reminder of Palm Sunday, Christ come in. So just kind of a neat symbolism in our home. But you get that again each year. So you take your old palm branches, and a lot of times the pastor will collect those, and then the fire you see there, they're burning the branches. So it's pretty cool.
And they are sacramental because they have been blessed.
Absolutely.
So you wouldn't throw them away.
Absolutely.
Not in the
and
Catholic
that's another thing
faith.
that viewers might not know. So anything that is blessed, whether it be a Bible or a rosary or a statue or a holy image, we believe, once the priest blesses those, they're a holy object. They're holy anyway, but they become even more holy. So you can't just throw these things in the trash, and you shouldn't. So, bring those things either to the Jubilee Museum. We get a lot of people who bring us old Bibles and things. And we actually have a deal with the local Catholic cemetery where once a year we actually bury these items, broken statues, old Bibles that are unusable, or they can be burned as well. So there's two ways to dispose of these things, but it's a sign of respect, just like the American flag. There's ways to dispose of an American flag properly. It's a sign of respect. So just kind of an interesting thing, but the Jubilee Museum will take those. But find out, if you're a Catholic or even a Christian and your church, burns the palm branches, see if they can take your old palm branches and use them for the Ash Wednesday fire.
Well, everybody can receive ashes. It
Absolutely.
Doesn't matter what age you are. You may be a child, or as in this picture, these look like high school or college students. Even clerics have ashes placed on their forehead. Here a priest is putting ashes on the forehead of a bishop. So this is not just for the common people or just for adults, but it's for everyone.
When you think of hierarchy, sometimes we forget that, even cardinals, bishops, the Pope, you sometimes forget that, they're still human. They're still human, and they receive these things. One of my favorite scenes is in the John Paul II movie that came out several years ago. There's a scene where he looks at his advisor and he goes, "Will you please hear my confession?" So just a regular priest, but John Paul II went in and had his confession heard. He's the Pope, but he's also a human being, and he's still a sinner. So that doesn't, just because you're Pope doesn't mean you're not a sinner all of a sudden. So, but it just shows, that his humility and that, I've got to go to confession. So this is just another way, of course the bishops, the Pope receives ashes, and you don't give them to yourself. So you can't hear your own confession. So, but this is a neat image here showing the bishop receiving the ashes from one of his priests.
And you said about Pope John Paul II listening to
having his confession heard by just one of the priests that was there.
Right. From what I understand, he used to go to daily confession, and that meant not that he was such an awful sinner, but he could reflect on his own life and find things that he could maybe do better. And through the sacrament of reconciliation, you do reflect, and that reflection causes you to become a better person, because you become more and more aware of things that maybe you shouldn't be doing, or the way that you might be treating people, and so forth. So the sacrament of reconciliation is a sacrament that is not just, sometimes people will say, well, I don't have any grave sins, I don't need to go. But it's just a spiritual exercise that helps you.
And I feel better when I go. You come out and you feel better.
And it just helps you spiritually.
Absolutely.
Well, you have something else here.
Look, I've got the gift bag down here.
Okay, all right.
Now, this is another piece I brought, Wanda, and this is a unique piece. And when a lot of people see this piece at our museum, we have it on display all year. At first, it's kind of a weird-looking thing. You've got Christ's face here, hands, a ladder, a saw. You've got the pliers to pull nails out. It's very interesting, but this is a cross that depicts all the different instruments of Christ's passion, from the whip he was scourged with, to the axe here which hewn the cross out, to the saw which would have cut the actual wood for the cross. So a very unique piece. We see these a lot, actually. A lot of people have little globes with them. They would have them in their homes. But this is a reminder to us, and this is a good time here during Lent, to reflect on what Christ went through, what actually happened to him. To die for our sins. I was telling somebody the other day, if somebody came right now and held a gun to your head and said, deny Christ, how hard would it be not to deny him? But this man was tortured and suffered, and he knew he had to do this for our salvation. But this is horrible. If someone's pounding a nail through your hand, how do you not scream out and say, stop? And again, Christ, even scholars say they're surprised he even made it to Calvary. He was beaten so bad. It says in the Bible, you could barely tell he was a man once he was finished being scourged. The crown of thorns, which you also see up here, was placed on his head. These are horrible, horrible images that we see. And a lot of times Catholics, we get kind of a bad rep. Well, you Catholics, you keep Christ on the cross. Well, you Catholics, your blood and guts and stuff in your church. Crosses with bleeding statues and things. But this is symbolism. For me, when I walk into some denominations of churches and I see a cross on the wall, to me it's a telephone pole. It could be a telephone pole. But we've got to remember what happened to Christ. When you look at the crucifix, you see this pain he suffered. We can never forget that, because Christ on the cross redeemed us. Not the resurrected Lord. Oh, it's all great on Easter Sunday, he's ascended, but he redeemed us by dying on the cross and suffering. So he had to go through this stage first. So this is a constant reminder for us in all of our Catholic churches. We have the Stations of the Cross, which we pray on Fridays during Lent as well. That's always before the fish fry, of course. But we do the Stations of the Cross. These are the stages that Christ took. Christ falls for the second time. Veronica wipes the face of Jesus. Christ dies on the cross. These are constant reminders of his way to Calvary, and his suffering and dying for us. And actually, I did bring another crucifix as well. This one here is just a cross with the instrument. This is one of my favorite pieces. This piece is probably a little over 100 years old. It is from Jerusalem, but a beautiful piece. But again, reminding us of what Christ did for us.
How old is the other piece?
So both these pieces are probably about 120 years old. This one may be a little older, we're not quite sure, but a very spectacular piece. But when we gaze upon this, we've got to remember, why he did this. I heard a homily one time that starts back at the very beginning of creation. A priest said, Adam and Eve, and he said, you can do anything you want, just don't eat the apple. And what happens? They ate the apple. Now, and the priest made a good point. He said, God could have said, we're going to start over. and things could have been completely different. But God had a plan, and this was part of the plan. So again, during Lent, reflect upon Jesus and what he did. And when you come into a Catholic church, especially if you're non-Catholic, this is our way of reminding ourselves. We know Christ isn't on the cross anymore, but this was a reminder to us of what Christ had to go through for our salvation. Now, it's interesting, because while Christ was hanging on the cross with the two thieves, he showed his salvation, what he was doing for us right there on the cross. The thief looked over to him and said, I don't understand, you have done nothing wrong. He says, but I'm getting my just reward. I'm being killed for what I've done. I am a thief, but you've done nothing wrong. And he asked Jesus on the cross, he said, when you come into your kingdom, will you please remember me? And he said, today you'll be with me in paradise. So right there, the salvation message, if you hadn't heard it up to that point, there it is on the cross, probably moments before his death. Mary and John, again, were at the foot of the cross. And it's always interesting to me, Wanda, that John was the only apostle. They were scared. And Peter, who became our first pope, he wasn't there. He was too chicken. They were afraid that the same thing could happen to them. But John and Mary were at the foot of the cross. And I think, if I'm right, John was probably the only one who wasn't martyred, actually. I think everybody else died. And actually, St. Peter was crucified upside down because he didn't see it fitting to be crucified the same way as our Lord. So he was actually crucified as well. But the followers of Jesus, and we talked in our previous episode about, St. Blaise, being martyred for being a Christian. This was a hard time afterward. A lot of people went down, for loving the Lord. And crucifixion was commonplace. A lot of people died from crucifixion. This wasn't just, a random thing. This Mount Calvary would have had crosses everywhere. And even Constantine, finally said this is just horrible and outlawed crucifixion later on. But you would literally be walking down the street and there would be crosses lining the road where people had been crucified.
And that's one thing that I wanted to point out, the difference between a crucifix and a cross. A crucifix has Christ on it. A cross is just a cross without any figure on it. Well, it looks like we are coming to the end of our program. Thank you for bringing all these wonderful artifacts, which you can see up close by visiting the Jubilee Museum at 57 South Grubb Street in Columbus, Ohio. Shawn, do you have some things that are coming up at the museum?
Do. So obviously during Lent, we encourage people to come visit, come see our relics, come see our beautiful crosses, come see the Stations of the Cross as well, and come pray with us. These are beautiful pieces to reflect upon and pray here during Lent. It's, again, a great time to get closer to Jesus and really, reflect upon your life and your soul through these things. But we do have a couple events coming up here. Check out our Facebook page and our website. We have an artist in April who's going to be displaying the photography, church architecture. This guy has gone through and taken photographs of churches all over the world. So we're looking forward to having that in there, Wanda. And at the end of March here, we're going to be having a St. Patrick's Day party, and the date will be about March 30th. Check it out. We're still finalizing some things, but we'll have that as well. So I'm Irish, you're Croatian, but we can all party down for St. Patrick's Day.
All of us love to party.
And we all like corned beef and cabbage, which will be the food at the event. So.
Well, thank you so much for joining
Wanda.
us.
It's always a
we'll
pleasure.
see you next month. And thank you for joining us. We'll see you next month, too.